go over the agenda. Robin will introduce the kind of admission aspects of the conversation today. Like, so what do you need to know about admission? How is it specific to Oxy? Hopefully this not only answers your questions about like looking behind the scenes in our process, but really specifically with the goal of advising the students that you might be interacting with or the members of your family that you're supporting to go to college. I will then be talking about financial aid. And again, generally, what are the terms? How does it work? What do you need to know? How does that look at Oxy? And then we'll come back on screen to do Q&A. And so if you want to have your camera off during the regular session, we can also then I'll come back on camera and ask questions and make this a conversation. But because we are packing in as much information as possible, we also really want you to use the chat. So for example, while Robin is presenting her session about the admission part, I will be answering any question that comes into the chat. And while I'm talking about financial aid, she will answer any questions. That way we can give you as much information as quickly as possible, but then again, I'll come together at the end and discuss in whatever area you want to bring up any questions.
All right, so let's get started. So the admission process. So we are going to start knowing that maybe some of you are working with middle schoolers or high schools. We're going to go all the way back about what you should be thinking about if you are particularly working with a middle school student, either in your household or in your community. And really in middle school, you should just be building that strong foundation, really thinking about those core subjects that are going to prepare students to be able to take those college prep classes when it comes to high school. So math, sciences, languages other than English, social sciences, English classes. Students should be taking challenging courses if they're available to you, but we know in middle school, a lot of the times there aren't necessarily those distinctions between honors courses or regular courses. Definitely exploring extracurricular activities. While you won't necessarily include activities you've done in middle school, that can be a really great place to start exploring the things that your student or child might be interested in. And then for those of you that have the option in terms of researching high schools, course offerings and different programs, what's available to you in your community based on the resources that you have at your disposal and where you might be located. Also working on study habits. It is never too early. Coursework is only going to get more and more challenging as students progress through their academic career, we hope. And so building strong foundations in terms of study skills, scheduling, time management are incredibly helpful. And then also seeking help with difficult courses from teachers or tutors or mentors, really identifying spaces where you or your student or a child that you're working with are finding some issues and some struggles, because you're going to see on this next slide that continuing with those core subjects is incredibly vital. So when we are looking at a student's high school years, what we are excited about is really thinking about what is the preparation that has made them ready for a college environment. And so continuing to take core subjects, again, math, sciences, social sciences, languages other than English, English courses, should really be something that students are taking every single year. Every school will have slightly different requirements or expectations, suggestions. At Oxy, we don't have hard and fast rules about the classes that you take in high school, but generally we're looking to see that a student is taking 5 solid courses, 5 academic courses every single year. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb kind of across the board for any selective college environment. High school is also a really wonderful time to start sort of that self-reflection and understanding what's important to me as a student. What do you see your student or your child really excelling in, really finding joy and passion in, and channeling that energy towards those types of activities. Visiting colleges, obviously, as you become a junior and a senior primarily, but certainly tagging along with a friend or a neighbor if they're visiting a college. If you live in an area, either here in Los Angeles, and you can visit Oxy, or somewhere else where there are other colleges and universities near you, even if a student isn't sure that that's a school they might want to go to, it can still be a really wonderful fact-finding opportunity to get a chance to understand what is it that I liked about this institution or didn't like, what are aspects of the college experience I maybe hadn't thought of that can be really helpful to glean from those campus information sessions and tours. And again, we really, really highly encourage you to schedule those official campus visits, really anywhere that your student is thinking about applying, as much as you can, as much as your resources make available to you. Getting a chance to visit campus can be really powerful. But not everyone is able to visit campus. And so we know there are lots of other ways that you can be prepared. So researching programs, going on the school's website, their social media accounts, really starting to understand their processes, because we're certainly going to talk a little bit about Oxy's process, but unfortunately it is not uniform across the board. And so this is where things can get really confusing, really difficult. And we'll talk a little bit about resources in just a minute, but really doing your research ahead of time, getting organized early can make this project so much easier. And then test preparation, if you are a family that thinks that testing is going to be a way to really highlight your students' academic experiences and academic mastery, but as we'll note, that's not a requirement for most institutions at this point. Interviewing, certainly at Oxy, is highly encouraged and is available at many institutions. And I will mention again and reiterate over and over that a school's college counseling center, their school counseling center, can be a wonderful resource. So as you're preparing through middle school and high school, where do you go for this type of information if you have questions? I know that can oftentimes be a really big hurdle and kind of demystifying this process. So some of the reliable resources, school counselors, as I mentioned before, many schools have college counseling offices, they have college or career advisors. Many of us here in LAUSD have like college advising corps that are oftentimes either staff members or college students at other institutions that work in the local high schools. So there's oftentimes support for that college going process, but not every campus has that. And so you may be relying on your school counselor, the person that helps you with your class scheduling or issues that you're having with a faculty member on campus. Teachers can also be a really wonderful resource. And sometimes those are folks that you know even better than your school counselor, especially if your student or child is at maybe a large public institution where the counselors have a really significant workload. Finding teachers that your child or you have a connection with can be a really helpful resource as well. Then there's us, folks like Courtney and I, who are admission counselors. We have counterparts in our financial aid office. And especially if you're looking at institutions that are similar in size to places like Oxy, we really are there for the students to really help you through that journey, to answer questions at every step of the way through the admission process and the financial aid process. Other ways that students can kind of individually on their own time get to know schools and find reliable information, campus social media accounts. Almost every college and university out there has them now. They are oftentimes run by the admission offices themselves. And sometimes the folks behind them are admission counselors or seniors that work in the office. And so sending a DM, a direct message, sending a message on Facebook can actually oftentimes get you directly to someone that can answer your question. So social media is a really wonderful place to get reliable information as well. I would note it should be the campus's social media. So you'll see some unreliable sources like your Facebook group and TikTok are maybe not the places to go. But another reliable source is current students. So students that go to the institutions you're excited about going to can be a great place to go as well, to ask about what is the lived experience of students, what a lived experience specifically of Black students on that campus, what are the supports and the resources available. You can really get at questions and maybe specifics to your experience that you wouldn't necessarily get on the general website. Unreliable sources, as I mentioned, the Facebook groups, the TikTok videos from random students that are not necessarily informed on the entire process, ranking books and websites. Those are money-making ventures. Those are for-profit ventures. They oftentimes have a variety of motives behind those ratings, those websites, the information that they're pumping out. And what you overheard at church on Sunday is not a reliable source. So keep that in mind, really try and focus on those reliable sources and really lean into those folks at your schools and the folks at the schools that you are thinking about attending. So another big question we see in the college admission process is this conversation around, when do I apply? Do I apply early decision? Do I apply early action? Will I get in if I apply regular? What is the difference between early decision and early action? So there are these three different types of applications: early decision, early action, regular decision. They are all distinct. And again, this is where research really helps to find out what decision deadlines your campus has. At Oxy, we have both early decision and regular decision. We do not have early action, but I definitely want to share what each of these are. So early decision is a binding application deadline, depending on when it is for your particular campus you're applying for. It's an opportunity for a student to apply to one school and one school only, early decision. If you are admitted to that school, whether it's Oxy or any other school that has an early decision deadline, you are expected to enroll at that institution. That means you are expected to withdraw any of your applications that you've submitted to other institutions, and you're essentially done with the college admission process, which can be really wonderful. Most of us have early decision deadlines in the fall, and most of us have really quick turnarounds, hence the name of early decision. So at Oxy, we have early decision deadlines in November and in January. They're exactly the same between the two dates. They're just two different opportunities for a student and family to make that decision. So if you know that Oxy or another institution is your number one choice, you've had a chance to chat with the current students, or you've had a chance to visit campus, and you really know that this is where you want to go, that's a great opportunity. But if you are someone that maybe hasn't quite started the application process or isn't quite sure if this is where you want to go, or you're thinking, I just want to see if I can get into this institution, I really discourage you against selecting early decision, because it really is meant for those students that know for sure that that institution is their first choice. It also will come up, and we can talk a little bit more about this when we talk about financial aid, and that early decision means you're getting your decision, but you're also only getting one financial aid offer. You're not able to compare financial aid offers and understand what costs may be at other institutions and how that would compare to your early decision school. So if you are a student and family that know being able to compare and find the institution that is the most affordable to you is going to be a huge part of the decision-making process, early action or regular decision might actually be a better option for you. So early action is similar to early decision, it's kind of that in between. So you will find out your admission decision much earlier than regular decision students, but it's not binding. So it's an early notification process that gives you the opportunity to commit to an institution maybe early, but not be so beholden to that decision. And again, we do not have early action at Occidental. Regular decision is probably what most of us are thinking about in terms of how we apply to colleges. So regular decision is a deadline where there's one deadline and then everyone that applied early decision finds out at the same time, usually sometime in March. At Oxy, it's usually like the third week in March. And then you have until May 1st to make your decision. You will get lots of decisions through early decision. You'll be able to compare and contrast, maybe visit those institutions if you haven't had a chance to do so. And you have again until that May 1st deadline to decide. For transfer applicants, there's no different type of decision deadline. There just is fall entry and spring entry. And we'll talk a little bit more about transfers as well too. So here are the Oxy specific deadlines. As I mentioned, we have both 2 early decisions and 1 regular decision round. We do not offer early action. For our transfer students, after a student has completed a full year of academic coursework, they can enroll at Oxy from another 4-year institution or a community college, and they can enroll in the spring or the fall. So November 1st is the deadline for spring, so you're coming in January. March 1st is the deadline for students that are planning to come in the fall. So how do we actually review applications? What are we looking for? What's important to us? So in the Oxy process, and you will hear this word at a number of places, and it's something you can certainly ask the admission counselors at the institutions you're applying to about, we use holistic review, which means we are looking at all aspects of a student's application, everything that they bring to the table, who they are, what kind of student they've been, what they've been involved with, their personal characteristics. All of that is important to us as we go through the application process. So this is a really broad sort of review of the different pieces of the application. But when we think about academic preparation, we are thinking about transcripts. We want to know not only the grades that you've gotten in your courses and that ultimate GPA, but are there any trends in your grades? Have they been going up consistently throughout senior year, even though you had a kind of difficult transition to 9th grade? Have they been going down maybe as you've increased rigor? What classes have you chosen to select? We are looking for students, and most selective institutions are looking for students that have really challenged themselves within their environment. Context matters. And so a challenging course schedule at one institution may be totally different at the school down the street. It may mean APs, it may mean honors classes, it may mean IB courses. You may have a student at a school that uses weighted grades or unweighted grades. These are all things that us as admission counselors really sift through and work to understand so that we can evaluate a student based on where they're coming from and what has been available to them. So don't worry about if you're like, well, you know, our cousin's family down the street, they do weighted grades, but we have unweighted grades, so their GPA looks higher. That is what we are here for. And so just know that when you are presenting your academic information, we're really taking into consideration context. Test scores, again, are optional at Oxy, as they are at many institutions. You will also find institutions that are test free, or what they say, test blind. That means that you cannot submit testing, and that means that no student that's applying will submit testing. And then writing ability is something that, particularly to liberal arts colleges, if you are looking at those, that we are really going to take some time to think about, because writing is a really key component of how we do our work here in the classroom at Oxy. Extracurricular activities, we are looking at all different things that you've done to be engaged outside the classroom, in the classroom, at home, at school, whether you have a job, you have family responsibilities, you work with a faith or spiritual organization, you volunteer, maybe you are have been kind of the like Zoom tutor for your neighborhood kids during the pandemic. There's lots of ways that you can sort of, that students can share with us what it is that they've been involved with, how they've demonstrated leadership, and what kind of community member they might be here at Oxy. Personal characteristics is my favorite part. That's where we actually really get to learn about the student. And I always remind students and families that really the writing on the application is the only piece that students still have control over when they sit down to do their applications. It's the one time you get to speak directly to the folks that are reading your application. So common application and coalition application, essays, personal statements. Most colleges and universities will have supplemental questions where we sort of ask questions specific to Occidental or specific to Pomona or Swarthmore or Carleton, teacher recommendations, counselor recommendations. These are all the pieces that we use to really understand who you are in the classroom, in an academic environment, what's important to you, what you're looking for, and how we understand sort of your rich history and what that will bring to the Oxy community. And so this is where I really, really encourage students and families to spend time. As family members that are on the call, I really encourage you to give your student a lot of latitude in choosing what it is that they write about. Certainly I encourage you to read it and help them proofread, but this is really an opportunity for them to express themselves authentically. And so when we see some really heavy-handing editing from an English teacher or a mom or a family member, it can really muddle the messages and the kind of authentic voice of the 17 and 18-year-olds that we're reading. So we really encourage you to give your students kind of free rein when it comes to answering those questions. And then other optional items, artistic supplements, athletic interests, interviews. These are things that on a case-by-case basis are going to apply to a student, may apply to you or your student. So transcripts, we talked about this before. Academic core subject areas, performance, so you're getting A's, you're getting B's, the rigor, the trend in your grades, your GPA, all of that is considered. And you can see our median admitted student GPA there is the 3.8. Testing, as I mentioned, for Oxy specifically, we are test optional. We will super score. So if you take a standardized test multiple times, we will look at the highest subscores from each section. And then you can see our testing medians as well. I will also note that these numbers continue to go up and will continue to go up as we remain test optional, because as you might guess, the only students that are submitting testing to Oxy and to most institutions, students that are doing really well on those tests. So by no means does this mean if you take an exam and you don't get a 1490 or you don't get a 33, that you or your student are not qualified to come to Oxy. I mentioned breadth and depth of your extracurriculars, school-related, community-related, other work, responsibilities. There's lots and lots of different ways that you can really communicate who you are, what you're excited to bring to and contribute to at Oxy. And the writing samples. Authenticity, that is what I always preach when I am chatting with students and families. It is so important. We consistently get the question of what makes an essay stand out, what makes an essay memorable. And it really can be anything. It can be small things, but most of the time it's because we're reading an application that feels incredibly genuine, that is authentic to that student, that is a story and a message that no other student could tell. When I'm reading that essay, it feels particularly singular. And then recommendation letters, in terms of what we require at Oxy, we will ask your high school counselor to provide some context on your school and a letter of recommendation if they know you well. If you go to a big school, your student goes to a big school and you kind of know like they've never met their high school counselor, they're able to opt out of that and there's no penalty to the student. We know that counselors are incredibly taxed in most school environments, and so this is not necessarily a requirement. We do require two academic teacher recommendations, so they should be from those core academic subjects. And then we do allow for additional recommendations, and this will be case by case at the institutions you're applying for. So find out, again, do that research, but we certainly welcome additional recommendations, whether it's from an alum of Oxy, a family friend, another teacher outside of those core academic subjects, a faith leader, a supervisor at work, a best friend, someone that's going to provide kind of different and dynamic information about you that we wouldn't get from possibly your English or your math teacher. And then decisions. So it's a really, really difficult process for us. I know, especially at a place like Oxy, where we spend a lot of time and care really thinking about how we craft the Oxy community. So it is months of reading and deliberation. We are trying to be as sensitive and understanding. It is, again, competitive, but also holistic. I mentioned before, our regular decisions are released in mid-March for first-year student applicants. For ED students, they are released about 4 weeks after you apply. So if you apply in November, it's usually before winter break. If you apply in January, it's usually by about Valentine's Day. And then just to give some context for the Oxy expectations about our applications and who's admitted, we're a very selective institution. We admit only about 38% of our students that apply. We have many, many, many students that apply to Oxy that are well prepared, that would be wonderful community members that we are unfortunately just not able to grant admission. That is the business of selective admissions and selective enrollment. And here you can also see a little bit of information about our transfer students, a much smaller population, but we are always excited to welcome transfers to campus. So when it comes to transferring, especially here in California, where we have such a powerful and successful community college program, we see a number of students that come through going from high school into a California community college and then thinking about transferring. And certainly that's possible at Oxy. But we also have students that we know that sometimes make a different choice right out of high school to a four-year institution. And that does not have to be the end all be all if they decide down the road that Oxy is really something that they're excited about moving forward. So we admit transfers, as I mentioned before, once they have completed a full year of academic work. So you can apply during that first year of your community college or your four-year college experience, but you need to have completed a full year of academic work by the time you are planning to enroll. So at the earliest, it's usually the fall of your sophomore year. We also then will enroll for the next 3 semesters. Students need to spend a minimum of 2 years at Oxy or 4 semesters at Oxy. With transfer students, we really encourage you again to research the admission requirements, including our own curriculum or the curriculum of the other institutions that you're applying for, particularly if you are a California student and have a student that's thinking about applying to a Cal State or a UC. They have very, very specific transfer requirements. And it is something that you really can't mess around on. You have to start thinking about that when you start your college experience. They're similarly at community colleges to your high school, there are transfer counselors available there. I highly, highly recommend that if you have a student going through the community college system, that they are in very close communication with that transfer counselor, building a relationship so they can get a chance to, so that they know they have the best opportunities available to them. And then same things apply. Pay attention to the deadlines, visit schools, all of that is incredibly important. And then finally, before we transition to financial aid, I'll talk a little bit about merit scholarships, because when it comes to funding in Oxy education, we have both merit scholarships and then need-based aid, but they're handled separately by two different offices. And so merit scholarships is something that live with the admission office. There is no separate application, and this all applies to first years and transfer students. We give equal consideration in ED and in regular decision. Those merit scholarships are based on academic ability, achievement, leadership, motivation, promise, sort of what we see the options are for a student in the Oxy community. They are incredibly competitive. So particularly at Oxy, we don't expect that the majority of our students receive a merit scholarship. Usually somewhere between 20 and 25% of our applicant pool will be awarded merit scholarships, and they are around between $10,000 to $30,000 a year. They, again, I will reiterate, are awarded by the admission office. So they're awarded on a one-time basis at the time of admission. So these are not merit scholarships that you can appeal, that you can change, that you can say, can I get $10,000 more because the school down the road gave me $10,000 more. This is a first and final offer when it comes to merit scholarships. Courtney is going to talk about the need-based process that can be much more responsive to a student and family's financial needs, to changing circumstances, and appealable, etc. All right, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. And so Robin will now take over the chat. Thank you for your excellent questions as we've gone through. But talking about need-based financial aid is the financial aid that we're probably more used to thinking about. The like, can I afford college? What are the scholarships available to me? You know, how is the school going to make sure that whatever my family situation is are going to be met at this? So different from the merit scholarships, which are not determined by your economic status, but really by how impressed we are in the process. So first thing you need to know about financial aid is that Oxy meets 100% of demonstrated need. This is a critical fact because not only is it so important for us as an institution to make sure that every student we admit can actually afford to come to Oxy. As an alum, this is incredible because there are only 70 colleges in the entire United States that actually offer this guarantee. So if you think about the hundreds, like actually thousands of colleges, I mean, there are like 400 colleges in California alone. So if you think about the hundreds of colleges in the US, there are only 70. And here we are, this tiny little college in Los Angeles, right, doing everything we possibly can. And so as an alum, when I take a step back from my work at admission, this is the kind of thing that gets me really excited to come here every day and to know how hard we are fighting and that we are working to offer as much as we can compared to these giant institutions with enormous endowments who are, you know, hundreds of years older than we are. And so just be proud of that. But what that means from a practical sense is that Oxy and any other school who does meet 100% of need is going to look at what the family is able to pay. This is different than what a family wants to pay. And that's, of course, a really, really important point of clarification. So the primary source of paying for college, the funds for college really come from the student and the family and what they are able to pay. So diving into then what that includes, there is a word we use in this process called the expected family contribution. And so there is the actual amount then. The college thinks this is what you can afford. For Oxy, we say, okay, we will make up the rest. Your expected family contribution is this. Oxy costs this. Here's where we fill in what they call the gap with the scholarships, with the grants, with the work study, the things we'll talk about. So first, how is that number determined, right? How does a school even figure out what can my family afford for college? The federal application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, this has kind of been around the longest. This is the thing you might be familiar with from when you or your other students applied. This is something that everyone is expected to complete, and it's really used at pretty much every college in the country. Additionally, many schools like Oxy also ask students to complete the CSS profile. This is a financial aid application that is run through College Board. So the organization that offers the SAT tests and the AP tests, for example. And so they're already working on gathering student information. And what we've found, and the reason a lot of schools use both the combination of the FAFSA and the CSS profile, is that it offers a much more complete picture. We're able to provide a better and a more accurate financial aid package because we're looking at both of those pieces together. The other piece of that is, of course, tax returns. This is the thing that is most accurate and up to date of like what your family is actually earning. And then for students who are in California, there's an amazing Cal Grant program that California residents who qualify under a certain income level and maintain a higher than a certain GPA level also receive money from the state of California. So being a California college, that applies only if students are enrolling at college in California and is certainly an advantage for that. So all of those pieces come together to help us, our amazing Office of Financial Aid, figure out, okay, this is what that family can actually afford. Now, so there are some, oh yes, Robin.
I was just gonna say, do you want to mention the Cal Grant Promise real quick?
I do. I wasn't in our slides, so thank you for saying that. Okay, so now just another alumni moment. This year, we are launching an incredible program for access, especially for our neighbors in California, which is called the Cal Grant Promise. So the last thing on this slide that I mentioned, students who qualify for the Cal Grant, so they earn a certain GPA in high school and they have under a certain income level. If they are admitted to Oxy, we will cover their tuition completely. Now, they will still be expected to contribute to room and board. If they are a very low income student, Oxy would still continue to meet demonstrated needs, so they might get even more support for that. Or if they fall in that middle area, which can be often a really challenging place to compare then the cost of Oxy to one of the amazing University of California schools or California State University schools, Oxy now becomes as economical as a state college. And this is something we are just exceptionally excited about and looking forward to. So just something good to know about Oxy. All right, now getting back into how to use your family, figure out your expected family contribution. There are, of course, I think a lot of factors that go into this. Oops, Robin, we lost our lost our slides. Thank you. So the first was like if there have been changes in your family. For example, if there's been a divorce, if there's been a marriage, if there's been a remarriage, if there's been a death, all of these, we're still not on the slide, Robin. There we go. All of these things will, of course, have an impact. And I think really importantly, be considered. You know, we know that this is going to change someone's ability to afford things. We know that sometimes there are two parents, but one of them isn't in the picture at all. All of this comes together. So these are things where you want to provide as much information as you can. You want to talk to the schools you're applying for, see what else they need. Start with what you do have, like who is the parent who is in the life of the student. Let's start from there and then see what else would be required along the way. But if this has happened in the student you are supporting, this is one of those areas where you want to just have a flag go up and say, wait, let's check in with this. Let's talk to the school. Let's directly reach out and make sure we know how this might impact that process. So now looking at the other special circumstances, the expected family contribution is redetermined every year that a student goes to that college. So at Oxy, we ask students to submit the FAFSA every year. We ask them to submit the tax documents. We use this information so we can make sure their financial aid stays up to date. When you think about these special circumstances, they don't just happen in the year when someone is applying to college. There are 4 years where a student is at college that something in their life might drastically change, and that could greatly impact their ability to continue to afford Oxy. And so our commitment is that once we've admitted them, we will continue to adjust as needed what is the financial aid for that year. So all of these things will be taken into consideration. Now, if you are applying to schools that are not meeting full demonstrated need, still talk to the financial aid office anytime one of these situations happen. This is definitely the time where you want to reach out and see if they can provide additional support. And certainly when a student is enrolled, that's going to be more likely able to happen than might be before a student has started at a school. So let's talk a little bit just about the categories of financial aid, a little more about the words you're going to see in this process. Need-based and non-need-based are two different types. So as Robin mentioned, merit scholarships already, not part of something determined if your family needs that, if you qualify for it, the income of your family. Similarly, loans are going to be offered to you if you're interested in pursuing that, and that's not going to be something that is limited by what you can or cannot afford. Now for need-based financial aid, so when we, again, say the family can afford this, the college costs this, What do we offer in the middle? This is what we offer. So work study, Oxy has an amazing program. I know I worked all 4 years at Oxy. A lot of students have jobs. This really helps cover costs of the books and the supplies, the paint, the chemistry things. Sorry, not a chemistry major, but the stuff that you have to pay for in your classes. So having those on-campus jobs are huge, an incredibly important part, especially of access for students from backgrounds who would not have the resources to call home and just get the extra funds when they need it. We do at Oxy still offer some loans. We're incredibly conservative about that. We cap this, we really limit it. We want to make sure when we talk about a school being affordable, it's like actually affordable. It's not just temporarily affordable. So at Oxy, we found that the average loan debt after a student graduates is really between $30,000 to $40,000. So when you think about the cost of a 4-year education, like that's really, really, I think impressive. And I think Oxy does a great job with using loans carefully. But we also offer grants and scholarships. These are not loans. This is money we are giving to the students that we are admitting that makes Oxy affordable in a lot of great ways. So any school that your student's applying to, these are really going to be a similar list of what's available. There are schools, and I would love for Oxy to be this, there are schools that are loan free, that are like, nope, we're gonna make sure all of our financial aid is covered without loans. It's very exciting. Goals for the future, go campaign for Oxy. We're gonna do it there eventually, but know that, right? There are some differences. So looking at this as a guideline of when you see what a school offers, what do these things mean? Looking at some actual costs just to bring this all into the reality, because certainly it's not the same price as when I went to Oxy 20 years ago. This is really what it costs for a student to go to Oxy. This is why it's so important for us to emphasize, or anyone you're talking to about Oxy, that we meet 100% of need. Because for 70 to 75% of our students, they are not paying $77,000 a year. Right. And that's why Oxy is actually a place that is affordable. And this is going to be true for any college that offers financial aid. The cost on paper is not going to be the same for every student who attends. And so making sure students know not to just immediately say, well, I could never afford that school, right? And instead apply, see what the scholarships are, see what they qualify for. They're going to be such a different conversation once you get down to the actual financial aid that is available to them. We have a tool on our website that I love and I know is required by law at every college in the country. So if you are in the process of supporting someone to go to college, you should be spending a lot of time on the net price calculator. This is something every school makes available to determine what does that school think your expected family contribution will be. So you can actually predict, oh, okay, Oxy thinks we would be able to afford this. So then now I can see what our financial aid would look like even before I apply. And if I go to another college's calculator, I can see what they think. They might be different at each school. Schools are going to have different factors for how they weigh that financial aid, even if they're using those same financial aid forms. But you can then, as a family, sit down and literally look at this school might cost this school might cost this school might cost this. And that is such a helpful piece of information as you go into the college search. This is also critical to what Robin was saying earlier about early decision and regular decision. If you can predict what a school thinks you can afford, you can be a lot more comfortable applying early decision in a binding application that says, great, I know I will go because I know the financial aid is going to end up okay because I use the calculator. So definitely a really, really important tool in the process. And I think something that people don't always realize is available to them. The deadlines for financial aid really match the admission deadlines. I think intentionally, I think schools do this as often as possible so that you're not trying to keep track of different things. So the rule of thumb is when you apply, you also want to submit all your financial information. You should just make sure all of that is done by those same deadlines. Now, there is certainly a slight difference sometimes of when tax things are available. So for example, for our transfer applicants, we do make sure we can adjust that space and give them time to get their tax information to us, even if it's after the application deadline. But really, rule of thumb, use both of them by the same deadline. And then just looking at a calendar of how financial aid works, when you are admitted is when you receive your financial aid information, which is why that calculator is so helpful because it's the only way you can predict that in advance. You then would submit tax returns again once you have that information, which is usually in April. In May, when a student says, yes, I'm going to that college, then they do, as part of their commitment and enrollment process, go ahead then and like sign the paperwork, say they accept the financial aid, or they could make other options for themselves if they want. And then over the summer, there's kind of a series of forms and the bills and things that begin to start. So that's what you would be looking at. That is your very, very quick introduction to financial aid. And thank you, Robin, for answering questions. So we want to now shift into kind of just having an open conversation about this. You are welcome, if you are interested, to turn your camera on and ask us, since we have the advantage of not being a huge group and being together in the Zoom, or you can keep using the chat. But Robin and I just now want to be here and to be as helpful as possible for the rest of our time.
Well, thank you for sure. This is really helpful information. So I just wanted to say that while perhaps people are getting their questions together.
Yeah, thank you to those of you that have already asked some very good questions in the chat.
And if there's anything you ask that you want us to elaborate more on, let us know.
And we can go for it.
I just have a question about the most recent decisions about waiving payments on federal loans. That only applies to people who already have the loans. It doesn't apply to anybody who's currently.
Correct.
Is it currently, or is it anybody who started their freshman year?
I don't know, Courtney, maybe if you were, I'm not completely clear on the like exact date, but I know that it's not moving forward. So my guess is that it's if you've already taken out loans, like of some degree, they would likely apply, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, there are very few federal loans where the payments would start while you are still enrolled. And so this really only applies to someone who's already an active payment.
Graduate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so graduate, or maybe took a leave of absence. Sometimes you pay off loans if you're on a break. Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I always like to mention when I'm speaking with alumni is our alumni volunteer program with admission. I have people in the room who do participate, so I know that I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but I'm just going to put the link in the chat in case you haven't ever signed up to be part of this. Robin and I and our colleagues in admission do not have the ability to speak to every single student who might be interested in Oxy. So the more alumni and representatives we have around the country, the better. We have alumni help us with interviews, going to college fairs, going to actual events, like they're just sending emails, sending phone calls, answering questions. There's so many ways that we can like quadruple the impact of our work in admission by working with alumni. So if that's ever something you're interested in learning more about, there's some info there, and I'm always happy to answer questions about it.
Yeah, and we can both put our contact information in the chat as well. So if you have follow-up questions or think of something after today, please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. And I would also recommend, especially if you have a student looking at Oxy in particular, but we have a wonderful Connect with Us page on our admission site, and most campuses will. And that has all of our admission folks listed based on their geographic area. So if you're joining us from outside of Los Angeles, actually Courtney and I both work with families outside of Los Angeles. So you can find maybe the admission counselor that will read your specific application and work directly with your student or family.
I've got a question for you. If you were advising a family on a single thing in which their child should work on to make them more attractive to an admissions department, would it be community service? Would it be strictly grades? Like, what would you say if someone was like, what should my child focus on to make them stand out to an admissions office?
Well, one, I would think it would depend on where they were in the journey. If it's a fall semester senior, I would say work on your essays. I think work on the research for the college process and work on some time of being self-reflective and making sure that you're applying to the right places for the right reasons. If it was the parent of a 9th grader or an 8th grader, I would say academic rigor and course selection can are so important and can open so many doors and really prepare a student for as many options as possible. And so certainly doing well in classes, always, we are hoping for that. But I think course selection is something that is a little bit more overlooked, that especially earlier in a high school career and middle school career can be really important.
My nephews will text me when they're picking their classes. And I love being able to be like, yep, okay, this looks like a good one. Like, looks like you're missing this. Like, what subject isn't there? But that would be my advice, is like, what is the student already doing? Because then your direction would be like, well, good. Well, what can we add to that? Like, if they're not already good in grades, then we start with good grades. If they're, if they're not already going to clubs, then let's add a club. But if they're already doing that, then we can have a much different conversation.
Okay, thank you.
And I know the question about recording, yes, we recorded this specifically so that it can be shared. So with all of you, we'll ask Kevin to make sure you all have the link. Anyone who then missed today could have that link. We want this to be a useful resource.
Right, and we plan, BAO can put the link up on our website so that people can get it from the website. And we now have an Instagram account too. So yes, we've got an oxy.bao Instagram account. So I think, can we put links up on Instagram?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I will absolutely do that. Yeah.
We'll put the link up on our Instagram account as well. Okay. So Stuart, did you get all your questions answered fully enough?
I'm trying to figure out which hat I want to wear, right? The dad of a sixth grader or a professor, right? I guess some of the clarifying things would be, like, to Kevin's point, if you're at a high achieving school and you're getting B-ish grades, like, that outweighs going to a different school where you get all A's and you have a 4.2 something. So how do you, like, I guess one step back, if you're looking at high schools, do you want to encourage people to find the most selective high school so that they could get into the most selective college? Do you want them to go to their neighborhood high schools so they could be with their friends and have socialization? Like, what are some of the ways to navigate that ship when you're trying to, steer young people towards, a highly selective college?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I would say there's not one correct path. I think when I think about like a student choosing a school, it should be the place where you think they are going to be most able to be successful, and that may really relate to their socialization and where they feel comfortable, no matter the perceived academic rigor of one school or the other. They may be a student that really needs to be challenged and needs to sort of be kind of like working up to a particular level, and so that will be really specific to a student. And a note about being a B student at a high performing school versus an A student at maybe a less performing school. We have expectations for students that are at those high performing schools that with the resources available at that school, that they will also be high achieving. And so it is not necessarily always kind of that easy of an equation of saying, well, hey, I got to be at this school, because we're not really comparing that student at high achieving school A to neighborhood school B and saying, great, well, this student's clearly more prepared. They may be more prepared, but that doesn't necessarily make them more competitive, because otherwise we would only have students from high achieving independent schools that have all of the resources, and that's not who's at Oxy. And so we really take that context into account. So I think especially with a sixth grader, it's sort of like, what do I find in these different school environments that help my student perform? And that could be a variety of different places.
Thank you for saying it that way, because I think so many people think the best, but it's also the best fit. And if you're stressing out a sixth grader or an eighth grader, or then by the time they get to college, they're not going to be worth a damn. Like, they're already going to be spent. And so I think a lot of things. Sorry, Nadine, I saw you had a question, but where a student goes, I think that message that you just said is needs to be on a billboard somewhere, because I think like fit is so important, and comfort level, and like the way in which, forget the, 30 years ago when I was at Oxy, but even doing Vista for the last, I don't know how many years, 8 years or whatever. So you see a certain type of student coming through the pipeline, and you know that they're gonna make it at Oxy. And so, you know, seeing that number is daunting, right? 77 is like, oh my God, you know, but understanding that all the other factors that go into the application process and being able to articulate that to parents, I think is far more than, you know, 4.2 GPA or 3.87, I'm sorry, and, you know, 77. Like sometimes people only see that and are like, there's no way I could make it. So I think all the things that we're talking about here, you know, in this, you know, recording hopefully will help parents see that, you know, there can be a way out of no way, as some people put it.
Nadine.
Can I ask you a question? So how, this is kind of just into your process as admissions people. I have a really smart student and she's a junior and she's at a very competitive school. She's taking all the competitive classes. She's doing really well. There are 30,000 of her across the United States of America, you know, like kids at private schools who are getting A's and who are competitive and driven, and they have a club and they have a sport. How do you distinguish between them?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. So you're not
And
wrong.
add into that, they don't necessarily have that.
I mean, I think this is why in our
Interrupt, but they don't
process,
necessarily.
oh, sorry, Nadine, I think it was cutting out a little, but we do focus so much on the holistic review. Like, what do we learn about the student as an actual person? You know, like how can we, in their writing and the ways they answer our questions, how can we picture them? So then it's not just, do they meet all of these qualifications, but are they someone who we would want to be someone's roommate in a residence hall, you know, who would be a leader in a classroom conversation? Like, not just would they do the homework in the class, but would they contribute? Would they actually enjoy being in a small classroom? Are they someone that you would remember if you met them, if you went to Oxy? Those are harder to quantify, but that's why we train so hard in our holistic process of not just saying, do they meet a couple check boxes, but who is this as a human? And can we picture them as part of the Oxy community?
Yeah.
And let me add this, you know, part as a former high school college counselor and as a recent grandparent who went through the application process with 3 grandchildren at the same time last year. The being reflective and self-aware and reflecting themselves in the essays and making sure that through the essay, they reflect the parts of themselves that are most important to them, that resonate with the school, is really an important place for children to pay attention, pay their time and attention, but also is part of how the school gets to decide, is this person going to be a part of this class? Because they really are trying to create a class, you know, a whole, you know, however many there are that get admitted at once, but they are trying to get a class of kids together that will work together and benefit from and contribute to the Oxy education. And so I'm sorry, Robin.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I would add one additional piece is that, as you were saying, we are thinking about a class. That's why there are 4,000 colleges and universities in the country. Because I actually shouldn't say so many of us. Almost none of us are highly selective. 70 to 80%, maybe it's even higher than that, of schools admit many, many more students than they deny. So we have this idea that every single college is incredibly difficult to get into when we are part of a very small minority of campuses that actually are selective and that we deny more students than we admit. But that self-reflection piece is so helpful because you are then hopefully applying to the schools that match, that are going to then find that spark and identify that spark with a student that they are sharing and find that match there. Because there are certainly lots of students that we deny at Oxy, that we don't offer admission to, that are wonderful students that have the club and the good grades. But maybe we can't picture them because maybe they can't picture themselves at Oxy, and that really comes through in the application. And so that self-reflection and the researching of the types of schools you're going to apply to, I think really increase a student's chance of being admitted, because they are probably applying to the schools that resonate with them, and that school is going to read that and feel that in the application. And certainly that's not always the case, because a student may be applying to UCLA, a place I worked and I loved, and they have more applications than any school in the world. They read 130,000 applications. They do not have the opportunity to say, let me find my spark that matches with your spark. They have a much more pared down review process, and that is just logistically how it is. And so it's not the case with every school, but if you have students that are looking at selective liberal arts colleges, schools under, I would say 5,000 students, they probably have time to really investigate each of those applications pretty closely.
I had a question. Particularly for families that affording college is difficult. For the transfer process, what is it for Oxy, and I guess for other colleges we should talk about also, for doing the first couple of years at a community college, getting your kind of core curriculum stuff done, and then transferring? Because I remember telling students and families, you know, you can save an awful lot of money by doing your first couple of years at a community college. And then wherever you graduate from, nobody asks, did you do your first 2 years at a community college? They just want to know, you know, you graduated from Occidental, you graduated from UCLA. Can you touch a little bit on the community college option for parents?
Yeah, so this idea that community colleges are much less expensive is certainly true in certain demographics. If you are a family of means, it is certainly going to be much cheaper because their sticker price is much lower. And if you are a family of means, you're going to be asked to pay the sticker price no matter where you go, 2-year or 4-year. And so certainly that will be a cheaper option. If you are looking at possibly a state institution that maybe has a lower price tag, where maybe again, you're kind of a middle income family, your student's not going to qualify for as much financial aid or much like need-based aid, then certainly it might be a cheaper option. If you are a student and family with significant financial need, you are not necessarily going to find that a community college is a less expensive option. Most four-year institutions, again, particularly when we think about peer institutions to Occidental, have significant endowments and significant financial aid processes that will, as Courtney was saying, really, really, really reduce that cost down to what a student and family can afford to pay. And that can oftentimes be even less than what it would cost to go to a community college. So we see students that find that going to Oxy, a place that has generous resources and financial aid, can actually be a more affordable or equally affordable option to community college. So that is really dependent on the student and family's financial circumstance.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
And the type of other schools that they're looking at, because
Exactly.
certainly not every school has the resources and ability to fund students. And so it's not always the case. I don't want that to be a blanket statement, but I think, again, really applying to different types of schools with different costs and different abilities to help a family afford it is the right idea.
I mentioned this to Stuart in the chat. If they're looking at Oxy and they're asking that question, then my advice is also the transfer admission process is actually more selective. Like as Robin showed, like we have a lower acceptance rate because there isn't room for as many transfers because our first years are here and they're happy and they're staying and they're graduating. So we also don't want someone to then reduce their ability to be admitted because they didn't apply in the first year when we would have given them financial aid.
Right. Perfect, thank you.
I want to piggyback on Kevin again. How do you know? You know, so let's just compare my place to yours right now. How do you know? Like, there's so many students that I have at ASU that would be so much better fit for a small college, but because there's only 3 colleges here, 4-ish, that they go because that's the place where it's known. Versus the things that you're articulating, you know, in terms of financial, but also in terms of comfort, you know, how would you tell a high schooler, you know, we think that going to a smaller school would be a better fit for you, or that type of thing, so that they know about not just the academic part, but, you know, their comfort level on once they get on campus. Because so many people here are like, oh my God, there's 50,000 folks, I just don't know what to do, you know, and they're overwhelmed.
I think sometimes asking the student to, like, in the reflection that comes through and in like what we were talking about earlier, but that can actually be part of the college search process as well. It's not just what you put in the application. It's asking the student, like, why do you want to go to a big school? You know, can you explain that? Like, is it because you want to go watch like large events in stadiums? Okay, well, let's break it down to what that also includes. Like, do you really want to be in a classroom with 500 people? There are students who the answer is yes, and they're going to be very comfortable and they're going to very happily sit in the back row and never be called on and do their work. But those of us who ended up at Oxy obviously would not have been happy in that situation. And that sounds like a nightmare. And so sometimes once you try to describe these actual elements, it helps the students see that. It can be hard to picture something that you don't know. And so just trying to guide their kind of visualization of that in the direction can make a big difference.
I think with students that have been particularly successful in high school, sometimes asking really probing questions that you likely know the answer to, but if they've been successful in high school, ask them what was it about your high school experience that made you successful? And they will likely say, I really enjoyed my teachers. Be like, okay, so do you think that you maybe want to end up at a place where you're going to get to know your teachers? If you know that that is has been your recipe of success in the past, what has it been before? Most students have not been in a classroom of 500 students. They have no idea how scary or intimidating that can be. They see their other friends are going, it must be the thing to do. But if you kind of take them back into the experiences that they have had that have been positive, you can maybe sort of point those out and be like, well, here are the type of schools that are going to mirror that. And I know some students can be really repellent on the idea of, I don't want my college experience to look like high school, which I totally get. But I think kind of pushing through some of that and finding there are good things about your high school experience. That's why you're applying to college. And how do they mirror what you're going to find at the place you end up? Any other questions?
Last call for questions.
Right, because the Black alumni have other things you want to tell you as well, just for 5 minutes before you go. We want to be sure your questions are answered.
Why don't you do those now, Alice? And if anybody thinks of
Okay.
any questions, they can do it after
Okay.
you're done.
Okay, well, it just basically, you all know, those of you who are Black alumni, and I can't tell, unfortunately, since we did try to reach out beyond our immediate Black alumni family. I don't know really whether all of you on the line are alumni or not. Some of you I know are, but you hopefully know then the Black alumni organization is all about creating a thriving Black community at Occidental. Both so that it benefits the students, but also so it benefits the alumni, and because it benefits Occidental as a whole, so that the education that Occidental gives can really give a high quality education to a diverse group of students. So that's what we're all about. We have lots of activities that we have throughout the year to try to do that. And our big one, our big sort of hallmark activity is coming up in September. September 28th is our Better Together, where we really try to bring together as many of the members of the Black community at Occidental as possible. And that means as many Black students, as many Black faculty members, as many Black administrators, as many Black alumni as possible, so that we can all get together and spend some quality time together. So it's coming up on the 28th. You'll get an invitation. You should get an invitation if you're a Black alumni in the email tomorrow. So hopefully you'll get it tomorrow and that you will respond, that if you can join us in person, we absolutely love it. If you can't join us in person, we do plan to live stream so that you can participate that way as well. We are going to continue this year, since it's the first time we've been able to get back together since COVID. We're continuing two things that were sort of special things that we do. And one of them was a book giveaway. So we had books that were donated by Black alumni or other people available for students to come and take with them. And it was a huge success. We had about, I think maybe 10 banker box full of books. And they were all taken 3 years ago. So we would like to do that again. If you have books you would like to contribute, please email us and let us know. If you're long distance, you'll have to give them to somebody else. But if you're in the Los Angeles area, we can figure out a way to get them. So if you're in the Los Angeles area and you have books you would like to give away, please let us know through the Black. You can either put it right now in the chat, or you can send it to the email that Robin just put in, blackalumni.org@oxy.edu. And we are now on Instagram, so you can follow us on Instagram at oxy.edu. And in October, we have a really super duper special event happening. That is the awarding of the Black Alumni Organization Student Champion Awards to the 6 champions that were nominated by Black alumni and selected by the BAO leadership team for people who made an extraordinary contribution to enabling Black students to graduate. We're honoring Dr. Marguerite Archie Hudson for the 60s. And she was the head of Upward Bound, for those of you who don't know, and the first Black professional staff at Occidental. Sheila Wills, who is a Black alumni who served in the admissions office and was an admissions officer in the 70s. In the, 80s, we are honoring Dr. Arthur Anthony, who was a professor at Occidental. In the, you guys have to help me with the years, at the 80s, 90s, we're honoring former President John Slaughter, and he will be with us in person. And so will Dr. Anthony and Sheila Wills. Unfortunately, Marguerite can't. Okay, we got Slaughter. And then the last 2, I think, are Professor Regina Freer for the aughts. Did I get to the aughts? Well, anyway, Professor Regina Freer and Professor Lamont Terry are the last 2 that are being honored. So we really hope that you can join us for that. It is during homecoming, so we'll have an opportunity for the whole Occidental community to celebrate these 5 tremendous people who made a huge difference. So September 28th and October 22nd are 2 days we'll hope you'll keep in mind. And we hope you'll RSVP right away to the invitation you'll be getting. And if you don't get it for any reason, please email us at that address, and because it's somehow we just missed you. So that's my, Robin is the communications chair for Black alumni. Previously, she was our fundraising chair. And so we're also completely and always open for more people to join our leadership team. So if you are interested in any specific aspect of leadership around the Black alumni, we'd love to have you. So just also let us know about that. I think I've finished my Black alumni spiel.
Well
And
done. Well
I'll
done,
be
Alice.
glad to answer any questions if we still have, I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody might have. Okay. So if not, should we just do thank yous now? Is now the time to say thank you? Because it was the admissions office volunteered to do this for us. And we are really thankful that they took their time to do this for us. And we hope we can do it again next year. That we'll keep building the word. And more people will come, because we really do want to be able to answer your questions. Part of the Black alumni's commitment to Black students was to increase our ranks. And the only way we can increase our ranks is by getting more applicants. So please put the word out. But if your student doesn't apply to Occidental, and if you're not a parent, you're just doing this as a friend, a relative, somebody who works in a school, and you don't know if people will apply to Occidental, that's fine. Just as Robin said earlier, we really are trying to help students find the right fit for them. There is a right place for every Black student, and we want them to get there. So that's why we're doing it. And so we just want to thank Robin and Courtney for doing this for us. We do, at the end of the year, as Courtney said, we do reach out to students that have been admitted. So think about doing that if you'd like. And we'd also like to thank Kevin, who is the alumni office person who is just a great supporter of the Black alumni. So thank you all, and thank every one of you for spending the time tonight. And we hope you got your questions answered, and feel free to, actually, I don't want to speak for Robin and Courtney,
Feel free.
but keep sending them. If you have them later, feel free to reach out to them.
Thank you both so much. Thank all of you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Oh, are we going to take a picture? Oh, if you don't mind.
We've already taken screenshots of people that. we're
Okay,
good.
well then, but if you don't mind, oh, that's right, you said the screenshots eliminate.
already
the
done
people
that.
who are screen.
We're good.
On the screen. Okay.
Yay.
Obviously, I'm
Okay.
not the techie.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Stay cool. It's still hot out there. Stay cool, people.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.